targeted pieces of legislation. But can you speak to like the rhetoric around that kind of seems like rock solid from one perspective, right? You're going to give parents the choice for their kid to be able to attend the the private or public school of their choice. So why would we deny the parents or students this choice? Just give kids the money and let them take it into that space. How could that be? How could that possibly be construed as being anti LGBTQ?
Yeah, and I've heard people legitimately say like, "Oh, well, you would want this option if your kid was bullied, or you'd want this option if you were an LGBTQ kid and you needed to go to a different space or whatever, right?" And I think the problem lies in the fact that we don't treat these organizations similarly under the law, and so any discussion about choice is at best a misunderstanding and at worst an intentional misrepresentation of the situation. So we actually last year when the vouchers were going through, myself and the interns looked up every non-public school policy that we can find. There are 181 accredited non-public schools in the state of Iowa. We found 176 policies, so about 97% of them. That was a lot. We went through them line by line to see what they said about LGBTQ people. 75% of them indicated in some way that they would be willing to discriminate against LGBTQ people. And that was either in an explicit statement saying that they wouldn't allow LGBTQ children or the children of LGBTQ parents to attend, or in like more subtle ways by saying that sexual immorality wouldn't be permitted. And then on some other page defining sexual immorality in a way that matches LGBTQ identities, or some just reserved the right to discriminate in the future. That was kind of the most common way that the Catholic diocese was doing it, was essentially saying, well, we probably won't do this, but if we want to, we legally can. So just so you know, like you have no legal recourse in that situation if we change our mind. Only 15% of them affirmatively said that they would not discriminate against LGBTQ people in any way, shape, or form. 15% of those 181 schools. So Iowa non-public schools have told us loud and clear what they're going to do if they're permitted to discriminate, right? 15% have protections. So any talk of competition between these institutions and public institutions isn't a competition at all, because we're not talking about institutions that are playing by the same set of rules. We're talking about one set of institutions that gets to do damn near anything it wants, and another set of institutions that is prohibited from discriminating by law against not just LGBTQ kids, but kids with disabilities, kids with different religious views, kids with, you name it, any protected class in the Civil Rights Act, for the most part, does not have to be observed by these private institutions. And that's just one thing. That doesn't even go for the transparency that's required for public institutions versus private institutions, all of these other things. Again, it's just not an even playing field. And so talking about choice is totally dishonest.
I think that that is something that is just so lost in this conversation is nobody asks choice for whom.
Right.
They're just so caught up in that like market logic, and that's going to solve all these problems. Like failing to realize the folks that the market is going to be allowed to actively discriminate against. Now,
Right.
when you say discriminate against, like the I'm trying to do the quick math here. The 85% that say they can do that, like what would be a concrete example of like, hey, I'm a parent, right? My child is openly gay. I'm trying to go get them enrolled in this private school for whatever reason. On what basis do they have to either admit my kid later on to find out they're gay and expel them, or just to prohibit them from applying in the first place? What are the hurdles that those folks run into?
I mean, it's all of the above, right? Like a lot of them just have initial contracts that you have to sign, essentially saying that you're not going to be gay or transgender. I mean, there's literal contracts in there that have it all spelled out in terms of, I will not engage in any sort of gender fluidity or transgenderism, which is not a word, but they say stuff like that all the time. Or I will not engage in sex outside of marriage, and then there's a little asterisk, and then you go read like marriage is between one man and one woman, and like all this other stuff. So it's sometimes it's that, sometimes it's just in the school policies, and so if they find out later after the fact, you're going to not be allowed to attend. Sometimes it's based on membership on a specific church. You have to go to specific churches in order to attend, and those churches are anti-LGBTQ, and so they're not going to let you be a member, and therefore you're not going to be able to go to that school. It's a lot of different ways, which is why we had to make the criteria so broad to even study this issue in the first place, because there are so many different mechanisms they're using, because again they have extremely wide latitude to discriminate in these ways. They can say pretty much anything they want in terms of who can and can't attend their private institution. They're allowed to do that by law.